So, tapos na tayo sa psychodynamic perspective. Tapos na rin tayo sa behaviorist perspective and the social cognitive perspective. Now, let's talk about the third force. If the first one was about, Freud and the psychoanalytic / psychodynamic perspective, yung second is yung behaviorist movement nga. Ito yung third force in psych. No? The humanistic perspective. It's a reaction against Freud and behaviorism. Yung focus nito is free will, self-awareness, and personal growth. Yan. Maraming proponents nito ngayon, no? Kasi it's leaning, it's an understatement yung leaning towards the positive side because it's, ito talaga yung positive psychology. This is where the roots of positive psychology comes from. No? So, yung humanistic perspective views personality naman as parang a combination of your free will and self-development. Yan. So, yun daw yung personality. Mga key figures dyan na makikita natin madalas is Abraham Maslow, kasi alam natin yung Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And yung pinaka-top nun is self-actualization. Yan yung buzzword sa humanistic perspective. And, of course, Carl Rogers. Right? So, Carl Rogers is also very prominent in positive psychology. Okay? Yung theory ni Carl Rogers on the self is that meron daw tayong real self and meron tayong ideal self. No? So, meron tayong self-concept. The self-concept is a parang difference noong sino ba yung real self natin and sino ba yung gusto nating maging, sino ba yung ideal self natin. The idea here is merong either congruence or incongruence. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, pagka nag-align yung real self mo sa ideal self mo, then mayroong congruence. And so, may harmony. Sabihin, you feel better. Kasi, your idealized version of yourself is the same as what you are seeing. Okay? Pagka hindi siya congruent, in other words, may mismatch, then you will develop anxiety. Meron kang idea of who your ideal self should be, pero hindi siya nagmamatch sa real self mo, then that would lead to anxiety or maladjustment. So, ito yung graph na makikita nyo sa book. No? If there's congruence, there's a match and there's harmony. If there's incongruence, there's a mismatch and there's anxiety. So, for example, if you see yourself as a student who studies well, a good boy, a good girl, a good son, a good daughter, yan yung ideal self. Pero in reality, you are not, displaying that. Then there's anxiety. If you view yourself as a good student, as a good Christian, as a good teacher, kung you have a profession, and then you are not what you call this, displaying that in your behavior, in your thoughts, iba yung real self mo. The farther you are from your ideal self, the greater the mismatch, the greater the anxiety. So yun yung idea niya of the self, and personality in general. So, i-differentiate din natin dito kasi in-emphasize din ni Carl Rogers yung forms of acceptance that would profoundly affect and impact yung self-concept mo as an individual and yung well-being in general. So, it's either you have unconditional positive regard or conditional positive regard. If you have conditional positive regard lang, syempre, yung acceptance mo will be dependent on a lot of things. Meet expectations. If you have a lot of expectations, then conditional yung idea mo of another person or of yourself also. And it can lead to anxiety, incongruence and anxiety. But if you have unconditional positive regard, then it can actually facilitate self-actualization as well. If you accept without judgment, if you value inherent worth, may worth yung person simply because tao siya, then mas magli-lead siya sa growth, mas magli-lead siya sa congruence and harmony. Yun yung idea niya. It says their unconditional positive regard provides the foundation for individuals to develop a healthy self-concept. Sometimes you have expectations of yourself that are too much. Parang naalala nyo yung SMART goals, diba? Specific, measurable, attainable. And sometimes hindi siya attainable. So, mas magkakaroon ng mismatch yung ideal self mo and your real self. If there is a harmony, may congruence, may growth, may unconditional positive regard, then you could be considered as moving towards becoming a fully functioning person. Yun yung idea niya of a fully functioning person. Okay? So may congruence, may growth, may unconditional positive regard. But there are also criticisms of this perspective. Like, we have to criticize naman talaga kasi we have to assess and we have to critically think about these things. So, isa sa mga criticisms dito is that it's overly optimistic. Alam niyo yung word na toxic positivity? Parang, positive. So, it's being accused of being naive about human nature. For example, how can you explain terrorism with positive psychology or the humanistic perspective? What are the personalities of those people? Hindi lang, alam mo yun, malayo yung ideal self nila doon sa real self. Parang mahirap i-explain, di ba? So, there's this criticism of it becoming too overly optimistic. And also, medyo vague and abstract. Critics argue that the terminology is often ill-defined, making it difficult to operationalize for concrete psychological study. So, yun yung mga criticisms ng humanistic perspective naman. So, as a summary, the humanistic perspective, referred to as the third force after psychoanalysis and behaviorism, we talked about certain concepts like self-concept, self-actualization. We also talked about Carl Rogers, and when he believed that humans are always striving to fulfill their innate capacities, and he called this the self-actualizing tendency. We want to be, in that ideal state of self-actualization. So what? Ano naman ngayon? I think one way to address the criticism is that yung perspective ng psych na ganito, the humanistic perspective of psychology, I think it has to be grounded on reality. Naalala ko tuloy sa mga workshops na pinuntahan ko, na facilitate ko. And then I was talking about cognitive reframing, parang looking at the positive side, taking away yung mga negative self-talk, right? And then I was talking about how cognitive reframing was looking at something in a better perspective or on a brighter side. Tapos, for example, if I'm nervous, I can look at it as, I can use this as parang medyo excited ako, hindi ako nervous, ganyan. And then one of the participants asked me, sabi niya, "Sir, paano naman, anong difference niyan sa gaslighting? Gaslighting yourself." Parang gaslighting yourself yan. So I was telling him, gaslighting is changing the facts, whereas cognitive reframing is shifting the focus. So, grounded pa rin siya in reality. So, it's not deceiving. So, siguro, one way in which we can address the criticisms of the humanistic perspective is kailangan grounded siya sa reality. Kasi minsan, baka nga naman too much head up in the clouds na yung orientation mo, na hindi mo na napapansin yung realidad ng buhay, puro ka resilience, tapos hindi mo na nabibigyan ng concrete solutions yung flood natin sa Pilipinas, di ba? So, we want to look at it from that side, na hindi lang siya overly toxic positivity. So, yun, I hope you learned something, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again on the next video.